Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for hanging around for our next session. Our next session, we have been talking about doing for MAPPS for a long, long time. I think I got on the program committee back in 2009, and I think we were talking about doing a CFO panel all the way back to then. So I'm happy to have this panel today. Our moderator today is Girish Joshi. Hopefully I said that name wrong or correct. He is with Geospatial Media, and I'm going to let him introduce his panel.
Thank you for having me here. Yes, you did pronounce my name correctly. My name is Girish Joshi. I work for Geospatial Media as the regional director, and I take care of the Americas. I'm also the host for our podcast, Geospatial Gurus. Glad to be the moderator for this amazing panel, and I'd love to start introducing our panelists one by one. CFO, the corporate quarterback, and the lineup starts with our first panelist, CFO and Executive Vice President of Merrick & Company from Denver, Colorado. The fact is that he moved from kindergarten to 5th grade and attended about 7 different schools, being a military brat. And he says that instilled in him the characteristic of adaptability from an early age. Please welcome Steve Betts. How are you, Steve?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I'll move along and introduce the other panelists, and I'll get back to you, Steve, if that's okay.
Perfect.
We have with us CFO of WGI, who grew up in the Midwest, just like yours truly, and still resides in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Also an Army brat, whose father served 2 tours in Vietnam and is awarded the Bronze Star. Please thank your father for the sacrifices he made. Please welcome David Kent. David, if you could also unmute your mic and say hello.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello.
How you doing?
Doing very well. It's comfortably warm down here in West Palm Beach, Florida.
Lucky for you. Last but not the least, please also welcome CFO of Optimal Geo. He's worked in large and small companies and thrived in a startup environment, managing the ups and downs of each industry where he worked. Alumni of Vanderbilt University and a resident of Huntsville, Alabama, Chris Brunhoeber. Chris, welcome to the panel.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Pleasure. We've got the brief introductions done, but I'd love to ask all 3 of you, or anyone who's willing to take the question. Pretty interesting title for the CFO panel, corporate quarterback. Who wants to take that? How do we get here?
I can do that. You know, when the 3 of us got together to throw around some ideas about this panel and what we were going to talk about, we just started using football terms to describe, you know, our roles and what we do at our companies. And since it's football season, we thought, hey, let's go with that theme. That'd be fun. So we thought, you know, when you talk about the role of the CFO is involved in every aspect of the company. We have our fingers in every single pie. You know, when you're talking about the chief operating officers, the COO, they're mainly focused on operations. And when you're talking about HR, they're mainly focused in HR, maybe organizational development. When you're talking about BD, head of BD, focused on sales. But the CFO is everywhere. We're omnipresent. So we thought of the CFO as the quarterback of the corporate team, because we're all over the field. We're scanning the field. We're looking for the plays to make, looking for the opportunities. So that's why we call this, the CFO, the corporate quarterback. Now, you could say, wait a minute, Steve, the CEO is also a company-wide role as well. And yes, the CEO is a company-wide role, but they're not as much into the nitty-gritty and into the details as the CFO is. So the CEO, we felt, was more like the coach of the team. whereas the CFO is the quarterback. So today's panel discussion today is going to be organized into 4 main areas, or as David and I, and Chris prefer to think of them as 4 downs. Get it? So we're approaching this discussion as 4 down territory because, 4 down territory, when you're CFO and you're in 4 down territory, there's no punting the ball. You know what I'm saying? So you play every down. So that's why this discussion is going to be organized around 4 main sections or 4 downs.
Excellent. As long as we all play nice, I'm going to still root for the Bears. I am from Chicago. I'd love to go down this 4 down territory and ask you, all 3 of you, to share your opinions, experiences, and strategies. I'd love to hear a little bit more from the other 2 quarterbacks as well. A little bit about yourselves, your role in your organizations, just so we can get the ball rolling.
Well,
Chris,
if
would you like to
you're
go first,
asking
or-
about
yeah.
ourselves from a career path perspective, I am David Kent. I'm the CFO for WGI, a national multi-disciplined engineering firm. I actually started off my life as a pastor, but transitioned into the secular vocation in the 80s. After earning my degree in accountancy from Western Michigan University, go Broncos. While there, I spent 3 years in public accountancy with Plant Moran, and then I spent 11 years in the healthcare industry, including being the CFO of a physician hospital organization with 450 physicians and a regional hospital. I left that industry partly because of the politics. I'm not a big fan of politics. I did a short stint in the hospitality industry for a 52 restaurant chain, and then ended up coming to the A&E industry back in, actually the date I started was September 10, 2001, the day before 9/11. So you can imagine that was quite the eye opener. The second day of work, we were all sitting around the table, and all the structural engineers were kind of describing what was going on, and so it was quite a shock. But I've been in the industry now for 19 years. Started with Carl Walker, and then when WGI acquired Carl Walker, in 2017, I came down here.
Wow, quite a journey. Thank you for sharing that. Chris, would you like to share some thoughts with us?
Sure. My background primarily for the last 15 years has been government contracting. I started out in very, very large public Fortune 500 type companies doing SEC reporting and internal audit. Pretty strong background in manufacturing. A decent amount of M&A experience really in the last 12 years. I've sold 3 companies and bought 2. So that's been fun. I like the government. It's a unique kind of deal with FAR. I've always tell people that I actually like FAR a lot better than GAAP or any of the SEC regs. FAR actually makes a lot more sense. It's a little more principles based versus rules based. GAAP, they've got lobby kind of folks that come in and come up with their own rules. So I really do kind of enjoy the government aspect with the FAR based rules. Anyway, I've been doing this. I've been a CFO for, I guess, about 15 years now. Again, small to mid-sized companies. Optimal, I guess, has been the smallest company that I've been a CFO, but we've grown tremendously in the last 4 or 5 years since I've been associated with them. I don't have a ton of industry space experience in this space. Really been in this role for about 6 months. In some ways, it's probably my favorite company so far because I do enjoy maps and geology and just everything about this industry. I think it's a little bit neater than a lot of the high-tech rocket science physics stuff that I've been associated with in the past. Anyway, it's a great
I'm pretty
industry.
sure it's a mutual feeling with all your experience that you have and that you bring to Optimal. Thank you for sharing that. Steve, back to you.
Okay, I'm Steve Betts, CFO of Merrick and Company. We're based in Denver. I've been CFO here at Merrick for 2.5 years. Prior to that, I spent about 15 years in the engineering business, as well as I have experience in banking, real estate development, brownfield real estate development. Served in various roles as controller, VP finance, and CFO and COO at a couple of those companies on the real estate side, and started my career a while ago in public accounting with Pricewaterhouse.
Excellent. And you brought up something that is a fair lead into the 4-down territory of blocking and tackling. We'll stay with you, Steve, for the next question if you're ready.
Okay.
I would love to, from executing a financial project and managing that with an organization, what's your perspective on the relationship operations has with corporate challenges that you may encounter in that dynamic relative to, say, oversight versus direct involvement in your company's operations? What are your thoughts?
Well, I view operations as the client of me, client of my team, the accounting, financial reporting, risk management, planning and analysis, treasury. Operations is our client, and we need to serve them the way they serve their clients, which are the revenue paying clients, the real important clients, right? But we need to serve their needs so that they can adequately serve their clients and delight their clients. So it's very important. We like to approach our relationship with operations on a collaborative basis. We need to make sure that we're on the same page, that we're working together to find solutions. I don't want to be telling them no every time. I don't want to, we got to work together to get to a common spot that's going to benefit both sides. I don't want to be known as the CF no. I'd rather be known as the CF okay. If that makes sense, right? So you got to be able to understand the costs and benefits involved, and you got to be willing to take risks, calculated risks along the way. So working collaboratively with our client, just like operations does with their clients. That's what I want to do. That's how I look at my role and the role of my folks that I work with in my area. But I do believe that we need a fairly healthy separation between operations and corporate operations in my role, because we've got to maintain objectivity. We have 6 different business units here at Merrick, and each one is unique. Each one is run by a very unique individual, and each business unit has a very unique team with their own agendas and their own goals in mind. So I got to make sure that I'm able to maintain impartiality and objectivity when I'm dealing with them. If I do something for one business unit, I've got to be consistent, right? I got to be thinking about the long game, I got to be looking at the entire field before I make a call, make a decision as to where to pass that ball, right? Because the CFOs, we are the gatekeepers of the financials. We're the gatekeepers of the cash. So we need to provide the guardrails for how we're going to conduct business as a company. In terms of challenges, if we as CFOs are doing our jobs properly, operations will work and consult with us regularly on issues proactively. So before they get into an agreement with a client, or before they execute a project, because you certainly don't want to be brought into a problem after the horse is already out of the barn. You don't want that. So if we're doing our jobs the way we should be, operations is going to feel welcome to come to us, to talk to us about issues before they become issues. And sometimes they do come to me before they even come to the COO, and that's a little awkward. That's okay, because we're all on the same team, and the COO and the CEO and I speak regularly. We all sit next to each other up here. So we all pretty much know what's going on in each other's area all the time. But I don't, accounting is not going to dictate how operations is going to decide to execute a project. They're not going to make any operations decisions. It's just not going to happen. Shouldn't happen. But like I said, the CFO has an enterprise-wide view, and sometimes decisions that we make, and it may not always be readily liked by everyone within the operations team, but that puts more onus on us to explain, to communicate why we're making the decisions we're making, how it affects the enterprise as a whole, and why it's the best decision for the enterprise.
A very thoughtful answer, and I wrote down the CFNO versus a CFOK. I'm going to use that one of these days. Thank you, Steve. David, same question. What's your perspective on that relationship between operations and corporate, and how do you tackle that?
Yeah, so I like the word tackle because it gets us back to that football analogy. I don't see us as competing. I am certainly not the corporate cop. That is a firm belief. I am not the corporate cop. We're not on this. For that reason, I don't like the idea of oversight. I prefer the word mutual accountability. Steve said we're all on the same team, and that's true. The reality is that on a team, you have different individuals with different gifts. I mean, think about football, right? You've got the quarterback, you've got the wide receivers, you've got the running backs, you've got the defensive tackles. Look at me talking football. And I don't even understand football, but I understand the terms. And so it's really important that we see ourselves as members of the same team, but using our specific giftedness for the benefit and for the achieving of a common goal, which is obviously providing profits that provide for bonuses and covers payroll and keep our families employed or keep our families fed. But my job, my role on the team is to help operations to understand what's happened and to anticipate what's going to happen and how that all fits in with the big picture the strategic picture that corporate puts out. So again, in that quarterback role, it's taking the strategic perspective of the coaches and helping to translate that into the plays itself that operations runs with. Now, I do that obviously by compiling massive quantities of financial transactions into meaningful, at least I hope, meaningful information. And then we work with the leadership to understand the implications and make decisions. And that's my role. In terms of challenges, because we sit in between, at least I perceive that we sit in between, the high role of the strategic corporate and the operational role of the people on the field. I think sometimes we're viewed as the stepchild, not quite operations, not quite corporate. And so sometimes, and I think Steve alluded to this, we get brought in a little bit late in the game. And consequently, some things have to be unraveled because things weren't thought about. I think we should be brought in more early in the process than often we are.
I agree. Chris, over to you. What's your experience been?
I'm going to echo a lot of what Steve had said. I think we have a very similar philosophy on that. I view operations as the customer and really stress to my team that they are the customer, and that's why we're here. If you didn't have the operations, you wouldn't really need the corporate or the accounting or all of those other functions. Having said that, though, corporate, there's a compliance and a risk management role there. And, part of that job is really to make sure that operations are, they're doing their job. You're kind of holding them accountable. And a lot of this is really from a contractual perspective. And the other thing, I think, to add value in this role, you really add value by getting to yes, by, trying to come up with ways that you can say yes to push things forward. And that's really where the value comes. It's easier to say no. We're not going to do that, or you can't do that, or whatever. But I think the key really is finding ways that you can say yes and get everybody on board. And again, I think it's easier to do that if you are brought on earlier in the process to these decisions. But anyway, I really always try to say yes, if at all possible. How can we get to something that works for everybody? And again, a lot of that's really from a contractual perspective. Optimal, we've grown significantly, and we've really focused on building out infrastructure and kind of standardizing, how we're doing things going forward. And I think that's a big role that I play. The other thing is I really try to ask good questions, right? And I think that can lead, to the right answer too. If you ask the right questions, maybe you get a better discussion. And I found that everybody really tries to do the right thing. And I think part of the key is just having good relationships with those folks and everybody understanding where, you're coming from and working together. And, that relationship between the ops and the corporate folks, I think is just critical to, good outcomes. I think if everybody, there's trust and some mutual respect there, that if you have that, you can really do great things.
Three lovely perspectives and spoken like true quarterbacks. David, I'm going to start with you for the next one.
Okay.
We've talked about, corporations and interactions with people, really doing the right thing and keeping everybody together and accountable. We all also struggle with our time management in our careers and our personal lives. And work ends up being the main pivot. So outside of work, what activities or hobbies do you do to maintain the good work-life balance, especially in this new normal?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question. And if I may, I'd like to answer it philosophically before I get to specifics. Because candidly, I think that the concept of work-life balance is a bit outdated. And I think this year in particular has proven that work-life balance is kind of a misplaced concept. A better term,
Indeed.
I think, a better term that was actually coined, interestingly enough, by Allison Mackey, the CFO for the Detroit Lions, is work-life integration. We in our lives we are faced with competing demands. I need to spend time with my family. I need to meet this deadline. I need time to think, but there's too many people, vying for my time. And in order to deal with all of these competing issues, we compartmentalize. It's the way that we try to deal with one thing at a time, and it's a defense mechanism. It's a psychological defense mechanism, and it works. But candidly, it's not healthy in the long term because it has serious downsides. It bifurcates the person and the personality. We are one person at home, and we're one person in the office, and we're one person when we're by ourselves, and we're one person when we're out in social settings, and our true self never comes out. And that takes an emotional toll on us. And I find it no surprise then that those who have so many different roles and they're trying to balance them all out and balance them all together, that you get a lot of executives that burn out. And so I think work-life integration, rather than work balance, gives us the freedom to be our true self in all of our various roles and responsibilities. So to get to the specific question, how does that work out in my life? What activities do I engage with in this work-life integration? I love to walk. I've walked ever since I was a young kid doing paper routes. And so if I have to think, if I'm struggling with a problem, I'll go for a walk. In fact, I just got back from a 3-mile walk. I have no problem just taking off for a walk around the building, a walk around the block, whatever. Or when I go home, if I'm trying to solve a problem, I walk. I love to talk to people, so you'll often find me walking around the building, just engaging in conversation with people. Maybe it's on politics, maybe it's on philosophy, maybe it's on work, but I like to engage people and help them to bring their whole person out. I love to solve puzzles. I do Rubik's Cube all the time. Often when I'm sitting here idle, I am solving it. So I like to find solutions, whether it's at home or where it's at work. I like to bring order out of chaos. And so, again, that's the puzzle. And oddly enough, I love spreadsheets. And spreadsheets I don't do just at work. I do them at home too. In fact, my kids will tell you that the last great vacation we had before they grew up and left, it was a trip actually down to Florida. And it was a week-long trip, and I had it broken down in 15-minute increments. And, it's just I like that. It's organized.
Wow. And you're very honest. Well, thank you for that lovely answer. except that spreadsheet part and 15-minute intervals. How about you, Chris? You follow the same pattern?
Very similar. I'm a runner. That really helps with the work-life balance, just clearing your mind. A lot of my best ideas or solutions to problems come out on a run. I went this morning running and had a couple of good ideas for today even. So I think that helps a lot. I think my wife would tell you I probably work and run too much. But that, I think most CFOs would probably say that. I think it's just, it is tough to be, and again, it depends on the company and what's going on, but it's just tough because there's so many different holes for your time, but it is, I think you have to kind of get away to some degree to recharge. You can only grind so long and there's just diminishing returns after a point. And, sometimes it's just good to step back because, if you're in that day-to-day minutia, sometimes you can lose the strategic focus. So whether you're out walking or out on a run or, out playing golf or whatever, sometimes it does just really helps me just to almost take an inventory of what's all going on and kind of weigh all of the different things, really more from a strategic perspective, I think. But that is a challenge with any fast-paced, executive job. You're really, there is no compartmentalization. It's just work and life together and just making, the time that you can.
Over to you, Steve.
Well, I'm going to echo a lot of what David and Chris said. I've never really been good at taking the time away from work. It's something that I've struggled with over my career. I think I'm getting better as I get older, but I work a lot during the week, but I also love what I do. So it's not hard for me to do that. I love what I do. I love the company that I'm at. So it doesn't seem like a chore. I mean, because I've been at companies and in positions where it can be a chore. It's a task to go in every day and face that. But I'm not at that point in my life, and it's so much easier when you love what you do at work and you love what you have at home. So the thing is, because I do work a lot during the weekdays, I try to make the weekends my own, where I spend time with my family. I love to, like David, and Chris, I like to go out there and walk and run and hike. I enjoy doing that with my family and with friends, but I also cherish the time that I get to do that by myself, because that is the time that I get to think about things. And oftentimes it's work. There's things going on here that require some additional thought. And when I'm out there walking or hiking in the beautiful Colorado mountains, it clears your head, and you're able to come up with some ideas that you maybe weren't thinking about when you were sitting behind the desk staring at the screen. So I like to do that. Golfing, although I'm not very good at it. One thing I started doing recently is clay shooting, and that is a part of the culture here at Merrick, and that is a kick. To be shooting at clays is a lot of fun. But the thing is that on weekends or when I'm on PTO, I do like to disconnect, but I do like to remain connected in case something pops up. So while I may not be opening up that laptop every single day, I always have that cell phone with me. So I want to make sure that I'm accessible to my boss, to my peers, and especially to my staff. I want to make sure that I'm not the bottleneck and I'm not holding up something. If they have questions, I want to make sure that I'm accessible to them. So I do have the phone with me, maybe more than I should, but I like to stay accessible, whether I'm in the office or not. And one thing is, under this pandemic that we're in, a lot of people are working remotely, and sometimes the lines can blur between work and home. So being able to
Very true.
set some boundaries is imperative when you're working from home. It's easier when you go to the office and then you leave, but when you're working from home just down the hall, that makes it even harder. You know, I keep thinking about the dying person's wish. It's rarely, man, I wish I spent more time at the office. It's usually, I wish I spent more time with friends and family.
Very well said. And I echo that, you know, having some connect even when you're on PTO is one of those necessary evils that you have to bear the burden, especially in times when we're all distributed and working remotely and being affected by, you know, global pandemic. Just switching gears, I'd love to find out from each one of you, what indicators you focus on when you measure, you know, the sustained growth of your companies. What do you focus on, and how do you communicate that to the adjacent groups like operations?
I've been very fortunate. Yeah, I've been very fortunate over the last really 15, 18 years to always work in high growth companies. You know, it's a lot better to be in a growing company. The work's fun, it's challenging. You know, it's not much fun being in a company going the other way. You know, and really it does set the example. Whatever you measure is what's important. So, you know, it is those things that you measure and communicate to your team. You know, we focus a lot on what we call value add or labor revenue, the things that we actually do, not subcontract out kind of stuff. And really that contract mix and the capability associated with that, I think is something we pay a lot of attention to. You know, it's tough in this industry from what I've seen that we have, you know, we've got some big projects and then we've got some small projects, but just keeping enough work in and being able to keep your utilization up is something that's just extremely important as you grow. You know, managing the growth in these kind of companies is very difficult. You know, you can't go out and hire a bunch of people for, you know, short-term projects. You've got to have a long view and make sure that you can sustain that level of employment. So that's something we do focus on a lot. We do use a lot of subs just to level out some of that. You know, backlog is probably the most important indicator in some regards, right? That you're growing, and as long as you're back, you know, if your bookings are greater than your sales, you should be growing. So that's something that we really do focus on. You know, it helps to have flexible backlog where you can actually move your people around and keep up that utilization. And, you know, if every deadline is the same, it can be very tough to manage. So we focus a lot on utilization. We're in the process of rolling out a new ERP system currently. I think it's going to help. We'll have all the dashboard KPIs built out in that. And that's one, you know, we had a meeting last week and that was one of the things, hey, what are going to be our real key things that we're going to push down to our program managers, and what are they going to focus on with the new system? And again, like I say, backlog, gross margin, DSOs, you know, we've done a pretty good job of keeping our DSOs, which days outstanding, which is essentially how fast you turn your AR around to get paid. So that's been a big focus. You know, we spent a lot of time in the last few months on pipeline, just what's the future look like, where are we going, what are our new opportunities, and again, just coverage of the employees and how far are they covered out into the future, and you know what that looks like. Something that's been a big deal for us really probably about 2 years ago is we put a big focus on quality and rework and that kind of stuff. We were growing, and you know, we didn't have any major problems, but we'd hired a lot of people, a lot of new people, and we had problems finding people that really had the experience we needed. So we've hired, you know, over the last couple of years, some people that didn't have a ton of experience in this field, and we've really worked on putting quality programs in place to make sure that, you know, we're doing good work. That's something we've always been focused on. You know, Mark Brooks and Optimal, or the company historically has a great reputation for doing quality work. And that's something we've really focused on as we've grown, to be able to bring people in and not really have any quality missteps. And I think we've done a great job on that. So I think those are really the big ones that we look at.
Thanks for sharing.
You know, I'm going to echo a lot of what Chris said. Backlog and pipeline, it's the mother's milk really of an organization. You got to make sure you have plenty of both so that you keep the troops working and money coming in the door. So yeah, Chris, spot on. Backlog, pipeline. I focus an awful lot on our cash cycle. Chris mentioned that, day sales outstanding, days payables outstanding. So you want to get your receivables in as quickly as you can. You want to get your payables out as slowly as you can, artfully, right? But cash flow management is extremely high on my list, if you will. Gross margin percents and dollars. Want to make sure that our projects are profitable. Very important. Overheads. Take a look at our overheads, our indirects, both in terms of dollars, but mostly as a percent of net revenue, to make sure that we're in line with where we need to be. Profitability, and the things that I just mentioned are all very measurable. But this next one, and yes, you're going to hear a numbers guy mention the C word, culture. To me, the culture is also one of the key indicators I like to look at. Now, how do you do that? And a lot of that is kind of what David mentioned earlier, by walking around, by talking with people. I don't spend a whole lot of time in my office. I really don't. I like to be out walking the halls, talking with people, asking them what they're doing, how they're doing. And by doing that, I get to learn more about them, but I'm also getting a feel for, are they stressed? Are they burning out? Are they euphoric? Are they happy? Are they dissatisfied? So it's kind of it's my temperature check, my informal temperature check as to the culture of the company. Are we losing that culture? Is it in jeopardy? And I feel under this working remotely environment that we're in, I am concerned about that, and what kind of impact is that going to have on all the rest of the things that Chris mentioned and that we're talking about now. So that's the soft side of Steve.
I can be real brief on this one, because I think we're all saying a lot of the same thing. There's a lot of KPIs you could look at. If I had to choose three, it would be cash, because you need cash in order to reward the team and invest in the technology and training. So DSO is obviously an important one. Profit, you've got to be profitable if you're going to grow. Otherwise, you're just kind of surviving. And I've been there, and I don't like surviving. I like to thrive. And then you need a good stable backlog, because that's your future. So those are three that I would push strongly for. Everything else kind of helps filter and interpret, but those three really kind of critical. And how we communicate those, we've created dashboards. In fact, on a monthly basis, we sit down with the different division leaders. In fact, I'm meeting with the Geospatial after this call to go over their dashboard for P8 or P9. I'm sorry, P9.
Excellent. We all talked about in these recent times, how do you get that temperature check? Because a lot of your folks are working remote or they're distributed. And that actually gets us into that strategic focus, the play calling. David, how did COVID-19 directly impact your decisions when running the financial organization? What has changed with the past 7 months for you?
I think if I were to say what COVID did for us, it caused us to accelerate some initiatives that we were either already doing or planning on doing, things like improving cash flow, growing business intelligence tools, increasing our automation to enhance efficiency. I think COVID also required us to work harder at connecting with one another, because we're not traveling. So we can't go as easily to all the other offices, which means we need to learn to communicate better. Fewer emails, I think, is one positive of it. More virtual meetings, more virtual communications. We have to up our game on our people skills. We have to get better at the soft skills. Individual team members respond to stress differently, and we have to learn how to demonstrate patience and empathy to their perspective, whether we share it or not. Because if we don't, if we're not patient, we aren't empathetic, they're not going to be effective, because they're going to be in fear. So that means we need more coaching, more listening, being careful and intentional with our messaging. So, you know, that's, I think, what's changed. Yeah.
Chris, your thoughts? What has
Well, we were
changed
running
for
out.
you in the past 7 months?
Well, we were running out of space about 10 months ago, and that was a huge issue. We bought a building and we started remodeling it, and now it's not quite the same, you know, same deal. Everybody's working at home. We're still going to go forward with the building. You know, we're putting a lot of safety features in the building, a lot of the, you know, almost surgical grade ventilation and UV stuff to, you know, take care of that. We really did a good job transitioning to work at home. It was fairly seamless, and I think it surprised the management team that in some ways we're probably more efficient working at home. So I think we did a pretty good job a couple of years ago going to the cloud and all of those things to enable that. You know, there was some issue with just we have large data files, so I think some of the teams have had to come back and forth maybe to upload, download some data files and maybe break some of the data into smaller subsets. But really all in, it's not been that bad. You know, early on, I think we kind of went in, not panic mode, but really kind of stopped doing a few things just out of uncertainty, you know, some CapEx, that kind of stuff. And I think now we feel a lot better, you know, going back to kind of business as usual to some degree. There's still a lot of uncertainty out there. But I think generally we've done well given the environment.
Yeah, I'll echo, I agree with what Chris and David said. The transition to working remotely was pretty seamless. And, you know, there were investments that were made a while ago, years ago, to accommodate this, but I don't think any of us expected it would be to this degree. But the transition was really seamless, and it's amazing how we're all getting more and more adept to Zoom calls and Teams calls, and can coach each other as to how the features that are on each one of these programs. But I think David and Chris really summed it up pretty well.
Steve, what do you expect will change in the next 12 months? What's your outlook? We've come this far. We heard, you know, the transitions have been smooth. You're learning newer ways to check the pulse of your employees, keep up their morale. You're still hoping that the investments made in property will bear fruit when people slowly start coming back to work from within the office. What do you expect to change in your organization in the next 12 months?
Well, Chris mentioned it, space, office space. That's going to be a biggie. You know, in the engineering business, our top expense is people, but the second largest expense is facilities. It's our office space, right? So that is going to be the big challenge: is how do we approach this? A lot of our space across the Merrick system, there's some pretty high vacancy right now, and I don't know how long that's going to last. But you know, we're hearing things from some of our offices that people kind of like this working from home gig. So some want to stay at home full time, others want to come in 2 or 3 days a week. So how do we accommodate that? The formula that we've been following traditionally isn't going to work going forward. So that's going to take some effort to figure that out. But I think it's safe to say we're probably going to find that we'll be able to do with just as well, if not better, with less office space going forward. And then I think we're learning a lot in terms of what we can do remotely through avenues like this. Do we necessarily have to fly everywhere and travel and be someplace? Or can we do it remotely? Is it more efficient to do it this way? I'm not saying you don't travel to meet your clients, but I am saying not every trip is probably necessary. So I think we'll be revisiting that. And because we are working remotely, I'm very concerned about cyber threats, cybersecurity, and what that can mean to the organizations when folks are working on their own Wi-Fi's from home. So that's a concern. How do we keep the company safe? And like I mentioned earlier, culture. What's going to happen with the culture going forward? We hired over 250 people last year. We're still hiring this year. Many of our new hires haven't even stepped foot in a Merrick office to get the Merrick culture. So very concerned about how that's going to shake out in the long run.
It surely is a problem. David, what are your thoughts, and what changes do you see in the next 12 months?
Yeah, well, mine are going to be similar, I think, to Steve's, though with a slightly different twist. We have an extremely strong team mentality at WGI, and so we have more of an inclination to work together rather than work remotely. I think working remotely is convenient for that work-life integration piece. But I think given a preference, at least our experience seems to be that people would prefer to be together. So I don't see less office space. What I do see is when we start running the limits on our office space, there's less urgency that says, oh, we've got to find some space now. And so you make bad decisions. You have added flexibility now because you can work from home temporarily and handle the excess capacity that way. So I think that's a huge plus that we walk away with. The whole virtual thing, and I agree with Steve, there probably was some unnecessary travel that the virtual meetings will eliminate some of that. But I don't think we're going to eliminate travel altogether. I think this actually will augment conversations and communications and openness and candor. I'm hopeful that it actually reduces the amount of email. I think email should be relegated to things that need to be documented and sustained and kept. But I think the idea of being able to pop up to someone else's desk over in Austin or up in Chicago is really convenient. And so I think it really fosters communication. So that's really kind of my take on it.
One of the things that Steve had said is a big issue for us too, and something we're real focused on is culture. Mark Brooks does a great job with our culture, and I think it's one of our keys to our success. I mean, I really do believe that. And it's just tough to do it virtually. And we've strategized about different, things to do. We used to do tons of team building events and company functions and all of those kind of things. And it's just not the same. It's hard to build that relationship virtually. So that's something that we really struggle with. Even like a Christmas party, we've always had really kind of big Christmas parties and really did a lot of things like that. And now it's just tough. And we found that, virtually the people just don't want to really engage in that kind of, we've done like bingo or cards or trivia, that kind of stuff. And it's just not the same. So I think that's something that we are definitely thinking about and trying to figure out how we do that going forward. I think big picture, there's just so much uncertainty out there. We had a lot of people early on asking us, when are you going to be back in the office? When are you going to be back in the office? That kind of stuff. And, we've really just taken a let's wait and see approach, and we're going to be behind, most people, the schools and the government and the larger companies. So, I think that's just how we're going to kind of do things over the next, 6, 8, 9 months, year. Again, but really focused on the culture aspect of it.
Kind of wait and watch.
Yes.
We talked about how COVID has impacted the society, the economy. There's also other factors in the near term that'll impact us faster, probably sooner. Say the political landscape, elections. How do you see this impact the A&E industry, Chris?
I'm new to this space, but I think the technology is advancing so much in this space that it is going to continue to drive growth. You know, we're trying to figure that out ourselves, where it's going to grow, where can we play. But I think just the technology and the communication, the bandwidth, everything that's allowing, you know, satellites to a ground station on the other side of the planet to, you know, pump data back here almost real time, all of that kind of stuff, whether it's AI and machine learning and all of those kind of things, I think are really going to, they're going to drive the growth regardless of COVID, right? And maybe even accelerate some of that growth with COVID. So I think that's something that we've really focused on. And, you know, I don't know what the answer is, but it's something we do spend a lot of time at. And again, I just really try to ask a lot of questions in that area, you know, about different technologies and different areas of the industry. You know, it's not, you know, I'm not spending a lot of time in it, but I do always try to just bring up different, you know, business ideas and technologies out there. And I think the industry is going to be very, very healthy, because I just believe there's so much change, and the IT is going to, GIS, IT have kind of come together really for a lot of the application development and that kind of stuff. And that's something that we've really looked at and are starting to invest in.
Steve, your thoughts?
You know, our industry tends to lag the broader economy by 12 to 18 months. We were officially in a recession in Q2. We had a massive rebound in Q3. Q4 is up in the air right now. And it's up in the air because of a number of things. One is stimulus package 2 has not come through. There's no vaccine that has come through. So there's still a lot of uncertainty. So is Q4 going to be a continued recovery, or is that going to be more of a maybe reversion back to a recession? So if we lag the broader economy by 12 to 18 months, then we're looking at maybe our industry getting into a recession summer of 21, maybe late 21, possibly early 22. And then there's going to be certain pockets that are going to be affected. A lot of state and municipal governments are going to likely cut back on their spending. So, you know, how's that going to translate to the firms that are heavy into those areas of engineering? The election, not going to get political, but I'm going to say historically, it doesn't matter. The economy will go up or go down, regardless if it's a Dem or a Republican that gets in. I'll tell you one thing, though, regardless of whether Mr. Biden or Mr. Trump wins, there's going to be more spending. It's just a question of magnitude and where it goes. But there's going to be trillions of dollars spent, whomever, you know, whatever the next administration is. But if we end up having a slowdown in our industry, we have a roadmap as to how we can cut costs and dial things back. We just went through it, right? We just went through it. So it's kind of a trial run. A dress rehearsal was the last 6-7 months. So we have a roadmap on how we can navigate through that. Is there going to be an infrastructure bill coming out of Congress? And we've been talking about this for 10, 12 years now. That would be a big plus. But really, if stimulus package 2, a vaccine for COVID comes in, an infrastructure bill comes in, that's what's going to move the needle. That's what will postpone any type of a recession to hit our industry. Overall, though, longer term for our industry, I think it looks good. I really do. Chris is right about technology and the impact that that's going to have. And I do believe that, you know, we're going to continue to see more consolidation in our industry. Private equity is not going away. They're just going to be doubling down. So it's going to be interesting, but it's going to be a fun ride.
I agree with Chris and Steve on the technology piece. That is probably a bigger issue to me than the politics. You know, there's a lot of talk about the potential impact of AI, artificial intelligence, or automatic intelligence, or whatever you want to call it. And I don't want to discount it, but for me, the biggest issue isn't so much artificial intelligence. It's the potential of people to find ways to combine lots of different technologies together into having a greater impact. I like to use the analogy of Henry Ford. You know, Henry Ford did not invent the car. He did not invent the assembly line. He did not invent mass marketing, but he combined all of these together, which were new concepts at the time, and combined them in such a way that made him so successful. And I think we are at a similar point in time in our culture, though not so much on the industrial side, but on the technology side. It's not about GPS data. It's not about visualization mapping. It's not about LiDAR or drones or AI, but about how we can combine all of these technologies and other ones that are being developed into a package that has the greatest impact on an industry. I think that's where the opportunity lies for us. And I think it's an exciting time to be in our industry. You know, we are a technology industry, and that's important. On the election side, I agree with Steve. I think the outcome of the presidency really doesn't matter. In fact, studies have shown that that's the case. Having said that, however, I think if the entire Washington goes blue, I think that would be disruptive to the Wall Street. And I think you'll see Wall Street stumble for a little while, and maybe Main Street. I don't know so much about Main Street, but I think you'll see Wall Street stumble, but it'll recover itself. It'll find its new norm, as it always does, and then things will get back to normal. And so I agree with Steve in that regard. But I will say this from a word of encouragement, the pastor of me coming out: take heart. Your expertise will always be in demand. Yours is not the oldest profession. We all know what that one is, right? But it's not the first one, but it is the first one to form a professional association, because our society recognizes the essential and high value of what you do. So, you know, don't lose heart.
Indeed, wise words, and I couldn't agree more with three CFOs who
I needed
are
an
actually.
amen.
Amen, brother.
Amen. Amen. What you just described, all three of you in various formats, is Geospatial 2.0. What's underpinning the fourth industrial revolution? It's very refreshing to hear that from four quarterbacks that are CFOs, not CTOs or CIOs. So it's definitely a validation for me at my end. Gents, we stand at the goal line, the finish line, and I'd love for each of you to chime in. If there was one piece of advice, a single piece of truth that you consider most vital to share with this forum, for our industry, what would that be? Feel free to run with it. Whoever wants to go first.
I'll go. I'm a big believer in KISS, which is keep it simple, stupid. To me, it's a little counterintuitive, but it's actually difficult to keep it simple. You know, as organizations grow, the tendency is to complicate things. You know, asking why and challenging those assumptions, especially during high growth phases where you're changing a lot of things, I think is just very important. You know, the key to that, though, is you need a good team and good communication. You know, communication is so key to everything. You know, don't over-engineer things, especially on the business side. Simpler is better. I mean, it really is. You know, the ISO, AS 9100, CMMI, all those things are great, but keep it simple. Make sure it works for your business. You know, that your policies serve the company, your procedures. Simple, consistent, understandable, repeatable beats highly complicated systems, right? You know, and a great example of this is the government, right? I mean, nothing's simple and nothing's easy in the government. You know, I had a $30,000 contract one time with a prime government contract. It was 96 pages. 10 or 15 years ago, we had a $2 billion commercial contract with a OEM computer equipment company. It was 20 pages. So, you know, simple will win, especially on the business side. You know, we do all the government compliance things at Optimal, but we really do run it more like a commercial company. And I think that's one of the keys to why we've been successful.
Right.
Well, I agree with that, Chris. I'll go. My advice is bad news does not age well. When you hear some bad news, when you get some bad news, get it out there, share it with others. Let's work on it together. Let's get that solution sooner rather than later. If you just sit on that bad news, chances are it's going to grow worse and it's going to get even harder to tackle. So get bad news out quickly because it doesn't age well.
That's actually great, Steve. I think people should hear that because I think too often we hide it. But okay, my last piece of advice. You know, there's an ancient proverb that says, "Where there's no ox, the barn is clean," but prosperity comes from the strength of the ox. Right? In other words, you know, sometimes you got to put up with the BS if you want to succeed. That's kind of the concept. You know, life is hard. I get it, and sometimes it can send us a bunch of BS. You know, whether it's politics, whether it's people, whether it's pandemics, or like this year, all of them. And we get tired of it. But we can grow and succeed by working through them rather than complaining about them. You know, the struggles in life that we face often show us areas in our lives where, or corporately, where we have room to improve, room for change. So my encouragement, my piece of advice is use times such as these to be better. You are the one that makes the difference. So be the difference.
Wow, lovely words of advice. You know, keep it simple, get that bad news out front, and try to better yourself, right? Collaborate more. I don't think I could ask for any saner advice, especially coming from such an esteemed group of panelists. I believe we're ready for questions if we have attendees that have posted questions.
I don't see any questions on there.
I
You've asked some really good ones.
Well, thank you. Do we have any questions from amongst ourselves, maybe that the panelists could share more insights on? Nope.
Huh.
Okay, what's your
We've
favorite?
had opportunities to talk, so I think we're already familiar with one another, and I have the utmost respect for my two colleagues. I think they have really great insight, and
Indeed.
I suppose if I had any encouragement is reach out if you do have questions. You know, we love to share our perspective with those who are willing to listen.
Indeed. Mark, thank you for having me over as the moderator, and I couldn't thank Chris, David, and Steve in no particular order for being amazing panelists, and we had our fun session discussing some of these points. Thank you for playing so nice.
Thank you all. Touchdown.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Touchdown. Take care.
Thank you all very much, all four of you. Great insight. Like I said, we've been trying to put a panel like that together for quite some time. Maybe we'll do it again. Get some other folks as well. Thank you, Girish. We really appreciate your input.
Thank you, Mark. Take care.